I used to think everything was under control. Life was good. Actually, it was damn near perfect. I had a beautiful wife, 2 wonderful kids, and a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Sophie and I had been married for 8 years, but she wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor. She was the one who kept everything together, no matter how chaotic life got. She was my constant. Every morning, breakfast was on the table. The kids were always dressed and ready, and she was always there, supporting my career. After work, I'd kick back and watch her in the kitchen, moving with ease. There was something calming about the way she moved, her hair flowing over her shoulders as she chopped veggies or stirred a pot. The kids would be running around, filling the house with their laughter, and I'd think to myself, this is it. This is what life's all about. For a while, it felt like nothing could ever ruin this. But lately, Sophie had started pulling away. At first, it was small things. A glance that lingered too long, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I convinced myself it was nothing. People get tired. Life gets stressful. Raising 2 kids and managing everything wasn't easy. I figured it was just one of those phases every couple goes through. But no matter how much I told myself that, something didn't feel right. Then, one night, everything changed. I was dealing with some work emails when my phone buzzed. I grabbed it, expecting some spam or a useless notification, but instead, I saw a text from an unknown number. Your wife is cheating on you. Investigate this if you don't want to lose everything. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My heart stopped. My palms started sweating. Sophie, cheating? No way. This was Sophie, the woman I built my whole life around. But those words burned into my mind, and suddenly, every little thing. Every distant look, every early bedtime, every moment she seemed distracted, started flashing through my mind. Things I'd brushed off before didn't seem so innocent anymore. I tried to shake it off, but that text stuck with me like a splinter. I told myself it was probably some sick joke, or maybe someone just wanted to mess with me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I opened up browser tabs, tried to focus on work, but nothing worked. All I could think about was Sophie. By morning, I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I needed answers. When Sophie stepped out of the room, I took my chance. I tried to sneak a peek at her phone, but of course, it was locked. Always locked. I wasn't about to ask for the password. That would raise too many questions I wasn't ready to answer. Instead, I dug around online, looking for any clues. Her social media seemed fine. Normal family photos, posts about the kids. Nothing stood out. Frustrated, I turned to the kids. I know it was messed up, but I was desperate. I casually asked if they had noticed anything different about Mommy lately. My youngest giggled and said, "No, Daddy, Mommy's the same." That should have been comforting, but it made me feel worse. They were too innocent to know anything, and here I was, dragging them into my own mess. Next, I started probing Sophie's friends. I ran into her friend Megan at the store and casually asked if she and Sophie had been hanging out recently. Megan gave me this weird look like she knew something but didn't want to say it. "Yeah, we catch up now and then," she shrugged. But something about her answer didn't sit right. Either she knew something, or I was losing my mind. At home, things were getting tense. Sophie noticed I was acting strange, and it didn't take long for her to confront me. "James, what's going on with you?" she asked one night while we were brushing our teeth. "Nothing," I muttered, avoiding her eyes. But she wasn't buying it. I could see the worry in her eyes, and that only made things worse. Each passing day felt like I was walking on eggshells. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't enjoy time with the kids, and every time I looked at Sophie, she felt like a stranger. The woman who used to be my rock now seemed like a complete stranger. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that the message was just a prank, or that Sophie was simply tired or stressed, like I'd originally thought. But the doubts kept gnawing at me, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake them. Looking back, I can see now that that text was the moment everything started falling apart. It cracked something inside me, something I didn't even know was fragile. And from there, it only got worse. The worst part? A part of me still wanted to believe it wasn't true. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that Sophie wasn't hiding anything. But deep down, I knew. Once those cracks appear, You can't just sweep them under the rug and pretend they were never there. That message turned my world upside down, and I was left standing on the edge, waiting to see how far I'd fall. And trust me, the fall was just beginning. At work, things were more manageable. I sat at my desk, staring at emails and spreadsheets, but my mind kept drifting back to that damn text. My focus was gone. I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for another message. Something that would make it all go away, but nothing came. Then came Olivia. She was new, young, full of energy, and had a smile that could make anyone think life wasn't as complicated as it felt. She wasn't just a secretary. She was someone who made an effort. Every time I walked into the office, she greeted me with a bright smile and asked how my morning had gone, what my plans were for the day. It was small talk, but somehow it made a difference. For a brief moment, I felt like someone actually cared about me, even if it was just in a small way. I tried to keep things professional. I was still a married man, after all, and that still meant something to me. But Olivia had a way of drawing me in. She seemed to know when I was down, and instead of ignoring it like most people, she'd ask, "You okay, James?" Her voice was soft, like she really wanted to know. It was subtle, but those small moments with Olivia made me feel seen, like someone noticed I was there. One day, after yet another rough night at home, I found myself standing in her office doorway, feeling the weight of everything I'd been holding inside. I wasn't sure how I even ended up there, but the words just tumbled out of me. I told her about the message, about Sophie acting distant lately, and how the doubt was eating me up inside. I even confessed that I'd gone through Sophie's phone and asked her friends, but I still hadn't found anything concrete. Saying it all out loud felt oddly relieving, like a weight was being lifted off my chest. Olivia didn't judge me. She just listened. She nodded in all the right places, her gaze unwavering as she let me unload. When I finished, she leaned in a little, her voice calm but certain. "No one understands a woman like another woman." There was something in her tone, a quiet confidence that made me feel less crazy for suspecting something wasn't right. "Let me help you," she said, tilting her head slightly. "We'll figure this out together." And just like that, a small burden was lifted. Maybe it was the way she said it, or maybe I was just so desperate to have someone on my side. Either way, I agreed without hesitating. I didn't stop to think whether it was a good idea. All I knew was that I needed answers. In the following days, Olivia and I came up with a plan. She made it sound easy, like tailing my wife to find out if she was cheating was as simple as picking a restaurant for lunch. She showed me tricks on how to follow someone without being noticed, how to read body language, how to spot subtle patterns. It felt strange, like I was playing some amateur detective, but at least I wasn't sitting still, drowning in uncertainty anymore. For the first time in weeks, I was taking action. We spent evenings observing Sophie from a distance, following her as she went about her day. When she left the house, I would park a few cars away, my heart racing as Olivia pointed out the smallest details. How Sophie's posture shifted when she thought she wasn't being watched. How her smile brightened when she was with certain people. Olivia made it feel like we were on the verge of solving a case. But every time I thought we were getting close, Sophie would do something completely normal, and I'd start second-guessing myself. Then one night, we followed her to a small cafe where she met up with an old friend. They were laughing and chatting, completely at ease. There was nothing suspicious about it, just two people having coffee. I sat in the car, watching them through the window, and this wave of guilt hit me. What if I was wrong? What if Sophie wasn't doing anything wrong at all? "Do you see anything off?" I asked Olivia, trying to keep my voice steady. She shook her head, but her tone was careful, like she wasn't fully convinced either. Or maybe I was just reading too much into it. I didn't know what to think anymore. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head over and over. Was I chasing shadows? Or was there really something going on with Sophie? The uncertainty was eating me alive. It was worse than knowing the truth, whatever it was. At least if I had proof, I could confront her, handle it. But this? The not knowing, it was torturous. Yet, no matter how much I hated it, I couldn't stop. I had to find out. If Sophie was hiding something, I had to know. And if she wasn't, I had to know that too. I glanced at my phone on the nightstand, half hoping for another message, but it stayed dark. I sighed and closed my eyes, already bracing myself for another day of watching, waiting, and wondering. Then, just as I was starting to think all of this had been a huge mistake, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw Olivia's name on the screen. "I think I've got something," her message read, followed by a photo. My stomach dropped as I opened it. The picture wasn't clear. There was a woman with Sophie's exact build, her same hair and style, kissing a man I didn't recognize. My heart raced. The photo wasn't perfect, and they were partially obscured by a doorway. The lighting was bad, and her face wasn't fully visible, but it looked enough like Sophie to make my head spin. Olivia texted again. "It's her. James. I'm sure of it." I stared at the photo for what felt like an eternity, trying to tell myself it was a mistake, that it could be someone who just looked like Sophie. But deep down, I didn't care. I needed to believe it. After weeks of doubt, paranoia, and sleepless nights, this was something real, something solid. It gave me a target for all the anger, all the confusion, and the coldness I'd been feeling from Sophie. "This is her, James," Olivia's voice echoed in my mind, feeding the fire that had been burning inside me. And just like that, I stopped questioning it. I didn't even try to talk myself out of it anymore. I was done second-guessing myself. If that wasn't Sophie, it was close enough to not matter. Olivia texted again. "Come over. Let's talk this through." I hesitated for a moment. I knew going to her place was crossing a line, but I was already too deep in this. The idea of going home, alone, with nothing but my thoughts torturing me, was unbearable. So, I texted her back, "On my way." When I arrived, Olivia greeted me with a warm smile at the door. For the first time in weeks, I felt some relief. She invited me inside, and the smell of something cooking filled the air. "Hope you like pasta," she said with a playful grin, pouring 2 glasses of wine. We ate, we drank, and the conversation came easily, too easily. Maybe the wine was loosening my tension, but before I knew it, I was telling Olivia everything. How scared I was of losing my family, how betrayed I felt, and how helpless I had been. "You deserve better," she whispered, her hand brushing lightly against mine. There was something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in Sophie's for a long time. The more we talked, the more the atmosphere seemed to shift. The room felt smaller, closing in on just the two of us. I knew what was happening, but I didn't stop it. Maybe I didn't want to stop it. There was something comforting in the way Olivia looked at me, like I was someone valuable. It was the exact opposite of what I had been feeling at home. And when our eyes met, it felt like gravity took over. Before I knew it, we were kissing. Soft at first, then more urgently, like we were both trying to escape the weight of our own lives. One kiss led to another, and before I knew it, we were stumbling toward the couch, completely out of control. My hands were all over the place, and the wine glasses were forgotten, sitting untouched on the table. The whole thing felt like it went on forever, though I couldn't tell you exactly how long it lasted. Time didn't seem to matter. All that mattered was that, for a brief moment, the constant noise and chaos in my head faded away. But as soon as it was over, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I was lying there, staring at the ceiling, and the weight of what I had just done crushed me. Olivia was next to me, asleep, her breathing steady and calm, but I couldn't seem to find peace. All I could think about was Sophie. Guilt washed over me in waves, cold and suffocating. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I loved Sophie. Despite everything, the distance, the anger, the doubts, she was still my wife. She was the woman I had committed my life to. And now I had crossed a line I never thought I would. I slipped out of bed quietly, trying not to wake Olivia, and sat down on the edge of the couch with my head in my hands. The phone on the coffee table caught my eye, and for a crazy second, I thought about calling Sophie. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to confess, to beg for forgiveness. But what was the point? I had crossed that line. There was no going back now. All I had left to figure out was how to live with it. The next morning, I was still in a fog. I saw Olivia's phone sitting on the coffee table, the screen lit up with a notification. At first, I thought nothing of it. But when I looked closer, my heart dropped. It was that same anonymous text I had received weeks ago. "Your wife is cheating on you. Investigate this if you don't want to lose everything. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. I picked up the phone, scrolling through the messages. Sure enough, there they were. More messages, more conversations. About Sophie. About me. Olivia had planned this. She had orchestrated everything, leading me into her trap. You set me up, I yelled, my voice trembling with anger. Olivia stirred, waking up with a confused expression on her face. What's wrong? She mumbled. I held up her phone, the damning text still on the screen. This was you. You sent that message. You've been playing me from the start. Her eyes went wide with panic, and she reached for the phone, but I pulled it away. James, wait. It's not what you think, she said, trying to calm me down, her voice soft and pleading. No, I know exactly what it is, I snapped, my heart racing. You've been lying to me, making me think Sophie was cheating just so you could get me into your bed. The words barely left my mouth before I could feel the weight of them. They didn't sound like something I would say, but in that moment, they were the only thing that made sense. Olivia sat up straighter, fear flashing in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I know. I cut her off, my voice breaking as the betrayal crushed me. You used me. You made me question everything I had. Sophie, my family, my whole life. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered, but her words fell flat. The damage had already been done. You knew exactly what you were doing. I spat, my fists clenched at my sides, shaking with anger. She stood up, wrapping herself in a blanket, trying to gather herself. James, please, let's just talk about this. I could barely keep my voice steady as I shouted, there's nothing to talk about. You ruined everything. Then, something in her shifted. Her face hardened, and her expression darkened. If you don't want this to get worse, you'll keep your mouth shut. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. What does that mean? I demanded. She folded her arms, the blanket slipping off her shoulder as she spoke with a cold, threatening tone. If you don't play along, I'll tell Sophie everything. Everything. My stomach sank. She had me, and she knew it. One word from her to Sophie, and my entire life would unravel in front of me. Everything I had worked so hard to build, gone. You wouldn't, I whispered. But my voice lacked any conviction. Olivia simply raised an eyebrow, daring me to challenge her. I took a step back, running my hand through my hair, my mind racing to find a way out of this mess. I only had one option left. You're fired, I said, my voice low but firm. She looked at me in shock. What? I'm done, I said again, more forcefully. You won't be coming back to the office. I'll make sure you get your severance, but this is over. Her face twisted with rage, but I didn't care. I had to cut her out of my life, no matter what it took. You'll regret this, she hissed, but I was already moving toward the door. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I needed to leave before I did something I would regret even more. The next day, I walked into the office and told HR to process her termination. They asked if I wanted to provide a reason, and I just muttered, personal conflict. It was the best I could come up with. I thought firing Olivia would give me some control over the mess I was in. I thought it would make me feel better. But it didn't. If anything, it made everything worse. Sophie still had no idea what had happened. She went about her day like everything was normal, laughing with the kids, making plans for the weekend, completely unaware of what I had done. I watched her closely, looking for any sign that she might suspect something. But there was nothing. She was still the same Sophie, still holding our family together while I was falling apart. I was a wreck. The guilt consumed me, gnawing at me every second of the day. Every time Sophie smiled at me, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my own lies. I had betrayed her, and she had no idea. I tried to focus on work, on the kids, on anything that would distract me from the gnawing regret. But it was no use. I was trapped in a mess I had created, and there was no way out. Each night, I lay next to Sophie, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I could keep the truth buried. Every laugh we shared, every moment of closeness, felt like a lie. No matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew things would never be the same again. Olivia was gone, but the damage had already been done. I had crossed a line, and now all I could do was wait for the inevitable fallout. A month passed. I tried to push Olivia from my mind and focus on Sophie, on the kids. I tried to rebuild some semblance of normalcy, but it wasn't easy. Every time I looked at Sophie, especially when she smiled, a heavy knot of guilt twisted inside me, tightening around my chest. But I kept telling myself I had dodged a bullet. Olivia was gone, and no one knew the full extent of what had happened. If I could just keep things under control, maybe, just maybe, I could survive this without everything falling apart. But then one evening, just as we were finishing dinner, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was. Olivia, standing on the porch like something out of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Her hair was tied back in that familiar way, and the same smile that used to warm me now felt colder than ever. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and deliberate. I stepped outside quickly, closing the door behind me so Sophie wouldn't hear. My heart was already racing. "What the hell are you doing here?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady, though everything inside me was screaming. Olivia's smile flickered for a moment, but then it was back, almost like she enjoyed seeing me this off balance. "I'm pregnant, James," she said, crossing her arms like she was laying down the law. "And it's yours." My brain stopped. I couldn't process the words. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, and I just stood there for a second, completely frozen. "What? Are you serious?" "You heard me," she replied, looking almost smug, like she had won some game. "I missed my period. Took a test. It's positive." "No," I muttered, shaking my head, my whole body in denial. This can't be true." Olivia didn't flinch. "It is. We need to figure out what we're going to do." Before I could even wrap my mind around her words, the door behind me opened, and Sophie stepped out, her eyes narrowing when she saw Olivia standing there. "What's going on?" she asked, suspicion in her voice. Olivia didn't hesitate for a second. "I'm pregnant, and it's James's." I watched as Sophie's face crumpled, her eyes wide in disbelief, then shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound came at first. Then the tears started, and her voice, shaking, furious, ripped through the air. "You bastard!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You've been lying to me all this time? After everything? You went behind my back with her?" I tried to step forward, tried to explain, but it was like my words didn't matter. "Sophie, wait." "No," she snapped, her face red with anger and pain. "How could you do this to me? To us? I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me?" "It wasn't like that," I pleaded, my own panic rising, but she cut me off with a bitter laugh. "You really think I'm going to believe that? You thought it was fine to sleep with your secretary? To tear our family apart?" "I didn't," I began, but my words felt useless. Sophie was beyond hearing any explanation. "I don't care what you didn't know," she spat, her voice now raw with hurt and betrayal. "You betrayed me, James. You destroyed us." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, and I stood there, unable to speak, knowing she was right. There was no fixing this. No words, no excuses that would make it better. Sophie turned and stormed inside, slamming the door so hard it rattled the walls. I stood there, staring at the door, unable to move. Olivia shifted awkwardly beside me, like she wasn't sure how to handle the aftermath of her own actions. "I'll be in touch," she said quietly before turning and walking away, leaving me standing there, completely alone in the silence that followed. Inside, Sophie was still screaming, crying, throwing things. I could hear her voice, wild with emotion, each word cutting through me like a blade. I followed her to the kitchen, my heart pounding. "Sophie, please," I begged, my voice breaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake." She turned on me, her face streaked with tears, her eyes filled with hurt. She raised a trembling finger and pointed it at me. "A mistake?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just a mistake. You destroyed everything. Everything." I tried to hold it together, but it was impossible. "I love you," I whispered, but even I could hear how empty the words sounded in the moment. "Don't you dare say that to me," she hissed, her voice shaking with fury. "You don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have done this." There was nothing more to say. No way to undo the damage. Sophie turned and began to pack a bag, moving quickly and deliberately, like she had already made up her mind. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice cold and final. "Wait, what about the kids?" I asked, panic gripping me as I felt everything slipping away. "They're staying with you," she snapped, not even looking at me. "I can't do this. I can't be here anymore." And with that, she was gone. The front doors slammed shut behind her, and the house fell into a deafening silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the pounding of my heart in my chest. I stood there for what felt like hours, but it was only moments. Sophie was gone. Olivia had shattered everything, and now I was left alone, holding the wreckage of my life in my hands. The kids came downstairs, confused by the noise. "Where's Mommy?" my youngest asked, clutching his blanket, his innocent eyes full of worry. "She had to go, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile, though every part of me felt like I was dying inside. "But everything's going to be okay. I promise." They looked at me, trusting and wide-eyed, and in that moment, I felt like the biggest fraud. I had failed them. I had failed everyone. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on me like an anchor. I tried to convince myself this was just a rough patch, that things would get better. But deep down, I knew better. Sophie was gone. Olivia was still out there, a reminder of the mess I'd made. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change the reality that everything I knew was over. In the weeks that followed, everything seemed to spiral out of control. The news of what had happened spread quickly. Friends I'd known for years, the people I thought would understand, turned their backs on me. I heard whispers about how I had ruined my marriage, messed up my kids' lives, and thrown everything away for a fling. Every time I tried to explain myself, to share my side of the story, the response was the same. Pity, judgment, or worse, cold, dismissive looks. "I thought you were better than that," one old friend said, shaking his head. "Guess we didn't really know you." Even Sophie's family turned on me. Her brother called, his voice full of anger. "You had it all, and you threw it away. What the hell is wrong with you?" I hung up the phone without saying a word. What was the point? The weight of everything became unbearable. Everywhere I went, I felt the eyes on me. The whispers followed me, just loud enough for me to hear. The life I had built, the home I thought I could always count on, now felt suffocating. I couldn't stay there anymore. I needed to leave. I had to find somewhere else, somewhere where I wouldn't be haunted by my own mistakes. It took me a couple of months, but I finally found a job in a small town a few hours away. It wasn't anything special, but it was enough. I packed up what I could, loaded the kids into the car, and drove away from everything I knew. Leaving that house, knowing Sophie wasn't coming with us, felt like ripping out a piece of my soul. But I kept my eyes on the road. Starting over wasn't easy. The town was quiet, too quiet at first, and the adjustment was hard. But after a while, things began to settle. The kids made new friends. They seemed to adapt better than I did. The kids' laughter began to fill the empty spaces in my life again, and for the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of hope. I watched them adjust to the new town with surprising ease, making friends and finding joy in the small things. Their happiness was contagious, and it reminded me that there was still good in the world. I started meeting new people, neighbors, co-workers, strangers who didn't know my past, who didn't see me through the lens of judgment or pity. At first, it felt strange, like I didn't deserve their kindness. But I let it in anyway, grateful for the chance to rebuild my life. I began to take better care of myself. I ran in the mornings, something I had always done to clear my head, but had neglected for too long. I joined a local soccer league, and even found time to read again. Little by little, I felt like I was rediscovering parts of myself that I thought were lost. I wasn't constantly consumed by guilt or regret anymore. I was simply living, and that felt like progress. Then came the call about the DNA test. At first, I almost ignored the number, unsure if I even wanted to hear what it had to say. But curiosity won, and I answered. The voice on the other end gave me the news I had been dreading but secretly hoping for. The baby wasn't mine. I ended the call without another word. I sat there in shock, trying to process what I had just heard. The relief washed over me slowly, like a weight lifting from my chest. But then, almost immediately, the familiar pang of regret settled in. It didn't matter that the baby wasn't mine. The damage had already been done. Sophie was gone, and I had already lost far more than my marriage. I replayed everything in my mind. What I could have done differently, the moments I had ignored, the choices I'd made without thinking. But there was no going back. The past couldn't be undone. All that was left was to decide what to do with what remained. I realized then that I had two choices. I could drown in regret for the rest of my life, or I could move forward. I still had my kids, and I still had the chance to create something new, even if it wasn't the life I had envisioned. I chose to stop looking backward and focus on what was in front of me. I reached out to new people, allowed myself to find joy in small moments, and began to build a life that felt right for who I was now. Not the person I had been, but the person I was becoming. It wasn't easy. It still isn't. But every day, I get a little stronger. Every morning, I wake up with a little more hope. I'm learning to forgive myself. I'm learning to accept that mistakes are a part of being human. And, most importantly, I'm learning to live again. I'll carry the weight of what happened with Sophie for the rest of my life. Some scars don't fade, but life goes on, and I owe it to myself and to my kids to make the most of what's left. This might not be the story I imagined for myself, but it's the one I have. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. A year has passed since everything fell apart. Life is different now. Not perfect, but better. There are still nights when I lie awake, thinking about Sophie and what could have been. I wonder if I could have done things differently, if I could have saved us. But those thoughts don't feel as heavy anymore. They come and go, and I let them pass. That's all I can do. The kids have adjusted well. They're doing great in school, they've made good friends, and they seem genuinely happy. I'm proud of them. I try to be the best father I can, though some days, it feels like I have no idea what I'm doing. Work keeps me busy, and I've learned to carve out time for myself. I run every morning now. It clears my mind, helps me think. I joined a local soccer league and met some great people. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world. I haven't heard from Sophie since the divorce. I've heard she's moved on, and I've made peace with that. There's no going back. The whole Olivia situation, it wasn't even my kid. I got confirmation months ago, and the relief I felt was overwhelming. But it didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that part of me had been broken in the process. That's something I'll have to carry with me. But I'm learning to live with it. I've started seeing someone, though it's not serious yet. Her name's Chloe. She's kind, patient, and understands that I'm still figuring things out. We're taking it slow, but it feels good to be with someone who sees me for who I am now, not the man I was. Life feels quieter now, simpler. I miss parts of the life I had, but I'm learning that starting over isn't the worst thing in the world. I've let go of the anger, and in its place, I've found something unexpected: peace. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy, but it's real. And for now, that's enough.